winners, pole sitters, and points leaders, all focused on a purse of $895,000. 1 year ago in Miami, the race started in the rain but ended under the sunshine as Alonso Jr. tried to get past Michael Andretti for the lead on the next to last lap. Michael Andretti went on to take the win, his only one of the year, and the purse of $250,000 to the winner. Today, it's a new track, Laguna Seca Raceway, for the 1989 Marlboro Challenge. The 10 drivers qualified are Emerson Fittipaldi, the newly crowned IndyCar World Champion in the number 20 Patrick Racing PC-18 Chevrolet. This season, he's won 5 races, including a $1 million victory at the Indianapolis 500. 4 times he started on the pole. In 1972, he was the world's youngest Formula One champion. He scored a second F1 championship in 1974, then retired, but returned to the IndyCars for what he says are his happiest days. For the second year in a row, he'll start on the pole. Rick Mears, the number 4 yellow Pennzoil Chevrolet-powered PC-18 from Penske Racing. 3 times the kart PPG IndyCar World Champion. 3-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. With 25 career wins, Mears is the current track record holder at Laguna Seca. Michael Andretti, the number 6 black and white Kmart Texaco Haviland Lola with Chevrolet power from Newman Haas. Defending champion of the Marlboro Challenge, he scored twice this year at Toronto and at the Michigan 500. A win in the challenge can mean an extra $150,000 in addition to the winner's share for Michael. Danny Sullivan, the gold number 1 Miller High Life PC-18 Chevrolet from Penske Racing. He won at Laguna Seca last year on his way to the IndyCar World Championship. Then, practicing for the Indianapolis 500, he broke his right arm. But then on the comeback trail, he won at the Pocono 500 and at Elkhart Lake. He's a definite threat here today. Teo Fabi, the Italian in the green and white number 8 Quaker State Porsche. 5 times he's won in the IndyCars, including here at Laguna in 1983. Porsches started their career in the IndyCars here at Laguna Seca 2 years ago. At Mid-Ohio this year, he damaged his car in a crash in qualifying, but then came back to score Porsche's first IndyCar win. And starting on the outside of the 3rd row is Al Unser Jr. in the number 2 blue, white, and red Valvoline Lola Chevrolet from Gallus Racing. Little Al has 9 career wins. All of them have come on road courses. This year, he scored his first pole at Long Beach and then went on to take the win there for the 2nd year in a row. But it's been a frustrating year since that time for Little Al. He's driving today in his 3rd Marlboro Challenge. Bobby Rahal, the blue and yellow number 18 Craco Lola Cosworth. Twice Rahal has been the PPG IndyCar World Champion. He won the Indy 500 and was the first winner of the Marlboro Challenge. Rahal won 4 straight races here at Laguna Seca in 1984 through 87. He too can add $150,000 to the winner's share of his purse for backing up his win at the Meadowlands. Mario Andretti, the number 5 Kmart Haviland Lola Chevrolet from Newman Haas. 4 times he's won the IndyCar crown. He's the 1969 winner of the Indianapolis 500 and a former Formula One champion. Scott Pruitt drives the red number 3 Budweiser True Sports Lola with Judd Power. He's a rookie to the challenge, but a veteran competitor, both an IMSA and an SCCA road racing champion. The Flying Dutchman, Arie Luyendyk, in the black and gold Dutch Boy Provimi number 7 Lola Cosworth from Dick Simon Racing. He's the 1984 Super V champion in his 2nd Marlboro Challenge. ESPN, celebrating 10 years as the leader in motorsports television, presents Speed World. A very special race for some very special men. 10 of the best in IndyCars, a 1989 Marlboro Challenge. Hello, I'm Paul Page. And this is special in part because there's nearly $1 million on the line for these 10 drivers. Additionally, there's no points to be considered here. This for them can just be a flat-out run. Now, Johnny Rutherford, 3-time Indianapolis 500 champion. You'd love to be in a race like this, wouldn't you?
Oh, I really would, Paul. This is the gingerbread. It's the icing on the cake. It's what every driver at the beginning of the season dreams about, is getting a chance to earn one of these 10 spots, because this is a race where you can make a lot of money and have a great deal of fun.
Just 100 miles. Any tactics?
No tactics. This is like my old sprint car days. You throw tactics out the window. It's a chance for you to go out there. You don't have to think about anything except going flat out from flag to flag, because that's where the payday is.
Well, we're close to being ready to go. The first two Marlboro Challenges were held at Tamiami Park in Miami. This time it's a natural terrain road course, Laguna Seca, California. Let's take a ride around with Johnny Rutherford.
Let's go for a ride around this course, looking over the shoulder with Al Unser Jr. Through turn number 1 at the top of the hill, hard braking down into turn number 2, which is a 180-degree left-hand turn. You get down in second gear here and accelerate very hard off of this turn. If you drop a wheel off, you could really be in trouble. It's a right-hand turn here to a short straightaway under the bridge, and you carry as much speed as you can because this is one of the good passing areas. To the inside of the road, back to the outside, shifting gears. You probably make about 23 to 25 gear shifts around this course. Hard braking into turn 5, which is a good passing area. But if you drop a wheel off here, you can see how far you'll slide out to the fence. Under the bridge here, it looks like you're going to the top of the world. Hard left-hander out to the edge of the road. Uphill, nothing but blue sky. Shifting gears, heading for the most interesting part of the course, the carousel. Hard braking, violent left-hand turn here. Downhill, very, very hard. The elevation change from the top of the carousel to under this bridge is probably a little over 100 feet. Accelerating again, top speed on this course, about 170 miles an hour. Slow speed at the carousel, probably down at 50. You want to carry enough speed through that turn and down to here to keep anyone from setting you up for a pass, because that's one of the places to do it. A little more than a 90-degree left-hander, and there we have one lap at Laguna Seca Raceway.
So that's the circuit. Now, as with all IndyCar racing, there's also the excitement of pit stops. And to cover that action, Gary Gerald.
Paul, one of the really fascinating elements of this Marlboro Challenge is the fact that each of the 10 contenders must make a mandatory pit stop, and there are some interesting ground rules. You have to wait until the leader has completed at least 10 of the 45 laps, and you must make your stop before he completes his 40th lap. On that stop, you must change 2 tires. The fuel hoses must be engaged. There's a lot of pressure on these crews because they know that the slightest miscalculation, the slightest mistake could cost them 1 or 2 seconds, and it could be 1 or 2 seconds that could cost their driver $250,000. Paul?
Well, it's taken an entire season to get to this point. A very, very special moment for 10 drivers and a lot of money on the line. The Grand Marshal here, tennis star Chris Evert.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
All right. In the sport, the brown eyes of Al Unser Jr. All the drivers sit ready to go. The veteran Mario Andretti. 100 miles of competition lie ahead. Bobby Rahal has won here. So has Michael Andretti. For the rest, it's an opportunity to put $250,000 in their pocket. This man, Emerson Fittipaldi, stuck $1 million in his pocket for winning the Indianapolis 500 earlier this year. The front row sits quiet, set to go, contemplating what lies just ahead as we're ready for the start of the Marlboro Challenge. PPG pace cars on the course in front of the 10-car field. They weave back and forth trying to get some warmth into their tires because the temperature here is at 64 degrees and it is overcast with the chance of rain. As a matter of fact, there have been some sprinkles pass through the area in the past few minutes. So rain, once again in the Marlboro Challenge, could definitely be a factor. The field working their way now on the pace lap, and here is the purse. You can see that second place is about $100,000 short from that $250,000 available for first place. $100,075 down to the last position, $20,000. And Bobby Rahal and Michael Andretti could add another $150,000 to the win by nature of the fact that they won Marlboro races earlier in the season. Here's the field. Fittipaldi with 5 wins and 4 poles sits on the pole here. Rick Mears to the outside of the front row. And Michael Andretti and Penske driver Danny Sullivan in the second row. The third row, Teo Fabi, Al Unser Jr. Back in row 4, Bobby Rahal, a former winner here, and Mario Andretti. And the fifth and final row, Scott Pruitt, a rookie to the Marlboro Challenge, and Arie Luyendyk. Now Now they move toward the final turn. They assume their formation. 5 rows of 2. A very important race for all of these drivers. Big money, big prestige. On to the pit straight now. The main stretch. The green flag comes out. And we are racing as Rick Mears comes across the front of Emerson Fittipaldi and picks the lead going into the first turn. Mears very racy here as Andretti comes up to challenge on the outside.
Boy, now that is real racing. Here's where your tires come into play, because if they're not just quite the temperature, you'll get to slipping and sliding around. We saw a couple of cars do it there.
Well, as Rick Mears back in got loose, Michael Andretti picked up the lead. So Michael is out in front now. Mears is second. Fittipaldi has dropped back into third place on just the first couple sets of turns here. Then Al Unser Jr. And then you see a fight developing now between Danny Sullivan and Little Al, with Bobby Rahal right behind.
We'll get to see how long it takes them to get comfortable with those tires when we start seeing moves being made. They've got to make their moves early and get a chance to get by to move to the front, Paul.
On board for a second there with Al Unser Jr. He started back in the third row. Rick Mears running in second as they make the first pass down the corkscrew. A magnificent turn and a place to pass, and you can see that Little Al closed in trying to put a move on Emerson Fittipaldi.
Yes, that's a spot where if you get in the right position, you can make a move, but then it's very fast from that point clear down to the bottom here to turn 11, which comes back by the pits to complete their first lap. There they've kind of strung out. Now they've got a little temperature in the tires. We'll see some moves if there's going to be any.
Michael Andretti pulls away at the conclusion of the first of 45 laps. 100 miles, the scheduled distance here. And the battle is developing second, third, fourth, and fifth as Bobby Rahal comes up behind Danny Sullivan and begins to challenge as he has been most of the last lap.
Yes, he's really putting pressure on there. We can see he's taking advantage, watching for that one little chink in the armor where he can insert himself and get by and take up the position.
Of course, Bobby Rahal in that number 18 Draco car is a master here. He had 4 straight victories from 1984 to 1987.
Yes, if anybody knows this place, it's Bobby Rahal. He's done extremely well. It's been changed a little bit, though, Paul, the track configuration since he won those races, but nevertheless, he really likes this place.
And as he tries to challenge Danny Sullivan in the Miller High Life car, carrying for the last weekend of the season, that number 1 that denotes the national champion, he'll relinquish that at the end of the weekend. Well, Sullivan won this race as a 300-kilometer race, the last race held at Laguna Seca for the Indy cars last year. So 2 very knowledgeable men as they work this course very carefully, coming into a hard-braking turn, and Al Unser Jr. tries to the inside.
That's a whole row of knowledgeable drivers, and that was a textbook move on Al Unser Jr.'s part. That's the one place that seems like we get the most passing. It's right there at turn 11. They set up, get into that corner, take over the other guy, have the opportunity to pick up that position.
Al Unser Jr., one of the concerns of all the drivers here was the limited amount of passing room. You just saw that approach to the last turn is a real braking area, one where they can come into the corner if the car is handling well and get past. But most of the places, you just have to go single file.
You really do, because if you take that opportunity or you make the chance for yourself, it could close up very quickly. And if it does that, then you put both of the cars out of the race.
The Quaker State Porsche line back toward the back of the field. Scott Pruitt just behind Teo Fabi. But you can see that the interval is still very, very close. It's still anybody's race with Michael Andretti out in front. On board with Arie Luyendyk. Possibility of some problems here. He slowed down just a moment ago. You can see he's not in contest with anybody in front of him, and he's running off the line.
No, he really isn't, and it's hard to speculate at this point what it might be, because he still is under power driving back to the pits, obviously. He may have a tire that feels a little funny to him, or it could be anything.
And the rules of the run here, as Gary Gerald mentioned at starting, is that you have to make 1 pit stop. You have to accomplish that stop after lap 10. We are on lap number 3, so even though Arie would go into the pits, make a stop and get back into the action, he still would be required to make yet another stop to comply with the rules. The battle between Rick Mears and Al Unser Jr. It's a battle for second place, but Michael Andretti has already managed to pull out a 2.5-second lead in the Marlboro Challenge. Great fight for second place developing between Rick Mears and Al Unser Jr. That bright yellow Pennzoil number 4 car, the Valvoline machine number 2, just behind Al Unser Jr. in the first 3 laps, got past 3 cars to take up this challenge with Rick Mears for second place. Michael Andretti is still out in front, anxious to put back-to-back victories in the Marlboro Challenge together. But Al Unser Jr. is really pressuring Rick.
That is incredible. You can see a little bit of trace off of the edge of the wings, the end of the rear wing there. You can see just how much moisture is in the air here, because that is a vapor trail or a condensation trail that comes off of these cars as they develop the speed.
Higher humidity, the more that trail will show. And it's quite humid here right now. The temperature's down just a bit. Rick Mears was able to hold off a charge at the end of the long pit straight up really in the second turn with Al Unser Jr., but little Al is still knocking on the back door. Let's go to the pits. Here's Gary.
Well, we're alongside Dick Simon, and Ari Leyendijk's car is just across the wall. A lot of disappointment. What's the problem, Dick?
Well, Ari came across the radio, said he had a chance to get by Pruitt. He went for it, missed the shift, and when the engine over-revved, it either ruined the spark plug or it might have lost a valve. We're checking.
Looks like a routine $20,000 payday instead of the big money.
Yes, actually, if it was an over-rev on the engine, much more than that.
Thank you, Dick. Let's go back up to Paul Page.
Ari Leyendijk actually driving in his second Marlboro Challenge. He was in the first one as well back in '87. He finished in last place that year also. Back to the battle for second place as little Al continues to threaten Rick Mears. And you can see that that battle is forcing them forward as they begin to catch that car number 6 running just ahead of Michael Andretti.
Boy, he is really putting the pressure on at every point. He's down close. He makes a wide arc into the turn, trying to get the line to maybe get under him or get the line off of the corner. So this is a real race here.
A lot of people seem sensitive to the fact that it's been some time back in the early 80s at Riverside since Rick Mears has won an IndyCar race on a road course. But surprisingly enough, Rick Mears is not one of those that's concerned about that. He seems quite comfortable with everything he's doing. He says the win on the road course will come whenever it'll come. Mears now continuing to hold off Al Unser Jr., Michael Andretti still out in front. Emerson Fittipaldi runs in 4th place, followed by Bobby Rahal, then Danny Sullivan, then Mario Andretti, then Teo Fabi. Ari Leyendijk is already out of the competition when he had the engine let go after over-revving the engine. This race, the Marlboro Challenge, an extremely important race, now in its 3rd year of running. Very important to these drivers.
This is supposed to be just a flat-out event, you know, just hold nothing back. You just want to end this race with a car just totally used up.
I think it's very important because it's a race you can do without thinking about the championship. So you're able to drive 100% of your ability and you know, 100% of possibility of the car.
It's a shootout. I mean, it's 100 miles, and it's not just the driver, but it's the team because of the pit stop aspect. There's strategy, and it's going 100 laps all out against the best so far this season.
Well, the challenge is a special race. I think the only race that I know in the world that's only a sprint type of race of 10 top drivers, dicing on a very challenging way, on a very strong way, and I think that'll be a great race like has been the last 2 years.
So the fight for second continues. We've been watching it steadily. You can see, too, that the rest of the field, while running single file at the moment, is strung out right behind the leaders. One of the advantages of a race of great drivers is that there's no slow machine. You're not overcoming some slower moving cars.
That's true, Paul, and it's an opportunity for everybody to go to the nth degree. It's just like Emerson said there. It's a chance for the top drivers to go flat out, very hard, all day, all the way. Here's Al Unser making a move on the outside. What a
look at that. Under braking, he darts to the outside, holds it in there. That's terrific.
Mears sure didn't want to give up that spot, but he had to.
You know, that brings into question now the relative ability of these two chassis, the PC-18 of Rick Mears and the Lola chassis that is underneath Al Unser Jr. You would really think that given the performance of the season that Rick's car would perform better at that point.
Well, you'd think so, but I think there's something called dollars, about 250,000 of them, Paul, here, that Al Unser Jr. certainly has his sights on. Look at this.
They were coming downhill. Little Al just really tucked it in, moved to the outside. Rick is already under braking. I don't think Little Al touched his brakes until he started to turn in.
It sure didn't look like it. He was very late braking there, but the car stuck. It worked. I'm surprised on the outside that he was able to pull that off.
So he moves up to second place and now can begin a pursuit of Michael Andretti, who with that battle, his lead was about 2.5 seconds. It's dropped back to 2.2 seconds. So they're closing down on Michael now. And now Rick, too, has to handle up a challenge being mounted by Emerson Fittipaldi in that number 20 Marlboro car. So at the top of the field, it's still Michael Andretti, who jumped into the lead on the first lap, taking it away from Rick Mears. Now in the Marlboro Challenge is at the front of the field between two longtime adversaries, Michael Andretti and Al Unser Jr. Little Al is closed up right behind Michael and now tries to the inside just to worry Michael, let him know he's there. You remember he made his pass that really mattered when he came around the outside, but boy, he's right there really worrying Michael.
I'll tell you what, watching Al Unser Jr.'s car, he is working extremely well. He's able to slide that car wherever he wants it to go. He made that move to show him that he could do it on the inside if he let him have a chance. Michael will be looking to close that door, and he'll drive right around the outside of him if he gets the opportunity. You watch.
Al Unser Jr. started in 6th place in the first 7 laps. He passed 4 cars to come up here to challenge Michael Andretti for the lead of the race. These two have been constantly at one another. Remember back to the start of this season as Michael and Little Al balanced one another at the Long Beach Grand Prix. Of course, it was Al Unser Jr. that came out on top in that fight, but they grew up together. And they've been racing one another since they did it in little go-karts out in the backyard very early on and followed their fathers around the circuit. Now they fight one another, and the prize here is $250,000 to the winner.
Al Unser Jr. might have made a mistake in showing Michael his nose there, because that's the situation where he'll now start picking up the pace, and it looks like he's done just that.
Well, the rules require the pits to open at lap number 10. They should now be open. Let's go down there and Gary Gerald.
Down here in the Pat Patrick pit, and Chip Ganassi is alongside. Chip, can we talk strategy just for a moment? Emerson starting on the pole, drop back to 4th, now in 3rd. Is this by design, trying to conserve fuel?
Well, I'll tell you, Gary, we got to make the finish if we're going to finish first, and it's a little bit of strategy here. Anytime after lap 16, you can look for us in the pits.
So you're not really that concerned then that it's Andretti and Unser out in front right now?
No, I think you saw what happened to those two out front last year at the Marlboro Challenge, and so that doesn't concern us this early stage in the race.
So the Emerson Fittipaldi team, Paul, is thinking long term, and they think fuel could be a big factor, Paul.
Well, Little Al continues to worry Michael Andretti. Of course, Chip Ganassi's reference to last year was these two were battling in the rain on a drying circuit at Tamiami Park in Miami. And on the next to last lap, Little Al tried to get past Michael, hit a puddle, took the car into the wall, and Michael went on to the win. Well, it's a dry circuit here today, but both of these drivers know one another very well, and they're getting around this course remarkably well. Now, there's an additional factor here. There's an extra $20,000 prize to the man who turns the fastest lap in the field. Well, thus far, the fastest lap has been turned by Little Al at 107.05 miles an hour. So now he chases young Michael. 3rd place, Emerson Fittipaldi. Danny Sullivan lies back as Little Al continues to fight at the back end of Michael's car. Rick Mears showing some problems as Emerson Fittipaldi comes around, and he drops back a bit. Now look, here comes Bobby Rahal. Going to move around Rick Mears as well, and Danny Sullivan closes in. So Rick Mears appears to be there's a problem on board then. Back at the front of the field, Little Al gets around Michael and picks up the lead of the race. So Al Unser Jr. coming down through the corkscrew, one of the key passing areas, was able to move past Michael Andretti.
That is incredible, and he's not wasting any time in driving on away, Paul. So obviously, Michael was holding him up, and we'll see now just how much strength he really has.
And how much speed to this point, and over 107 miles an hour, the fastest car in the race. Now can he pull away? You know, Little Al says that he likes these particular kind of races, that he likes these short little sprints. Of course, as an IROC champion, that would certainly testify to that. He loves this kind of racing. On board with the leader, Al Unser Jr., out in front for the first time on lap number 12 here of the Marlboro Challenge. Developing back in the field now. Teo Fabi trying to hold off a charging Scott Pruitt. The battle for 8th place, and 7th place Rick Mears lies just ahead. Rick apparently with serious problems because he's been dropping steadily back. But Teo Fabi and Scott Pruitt have a fight going out in front of the field. Al Unser Jr. For a moment, Danny Sullivan picked up the fast lap, ran at 107.25 miles an hour, but then Al Unser Jr. answered with a lap at 107.42 miles an hour. So that extra $20,000 for the moment is back in the hands of Al Unser Jr. The number 3 Budweiser car of Scott Pruitt chasing the Porsche of Teo Fabi.
Boy, it's amazing what money will do, isn't it, Paul? They have a chance to go for 20,000 instead of fast lap. It looks like they are playing ping pong. One has it, then the other one, and it's back and forth.
Extra incentive, though, for the 2nd place driver, Michael Andretti. Also, by the way, for the 6th place runner, Bobby Rahal. In the other 2 races with the Marlboro sponsorship this season, the Meadowlands and then the Michigan 500. Well, Rahal won at the Meadowlands, and at the Michigan 500, it was Michael Andretti. Well, if they score a win here, they would add $150,000 to the already existing $250,000 prize for first place. So perhaps the man with the most incentive at the moment is Michael Andretti, as he wants to catch Al Unser Jr.
That would certainly make for a nice Christmas present to take home that much money. I'm sure their wives would be able to spend that quite easily.
Rick Mears struggling now, not running laps at nearly the pace that he was earlier, doing his best to hold off Teo Fabi and Scott Pruitt charging up behind him. And that Penske DC-18 Chevrolet-powered machine. Back looking now up at 3rd place, Emerson Fittipaldi, the number 20 car. And he is trying to climb that hill and catch Michael Andretti running in 2nd place just ahead. Danny Sullivan is staying in touch as well.
Yes, Michael can see Emerson now closing in his mirrors, and Emerson is methodically chopping away at that lead he has on him. It won't be long till he'll be right up there challenging.
So Rick Mears surprised everybody with a great start, jumping across the pole sitter Emerson Fittipaldi, but then almost immediately Michael Andretti was able to get around. And Al Unser Jr. came carving up through the field from 6th place, chasing Michael Andretti. Finally, he got around Michael to pick up the lead. Follow that action here in the first 17 laps of the 45-lap scheduled distance. Fittipaldi already crowned as the IndyCar champion. He's having one whale of a season.
Paul, you know, there was some talk earlier from some of the crews about the possibility of a little fuel problem in getting the fuel to go the distance. So Al Unser running as hard as he's running, you know, it'll bear watching to see exactly what's going to happen at the end whenever it comes time for the last bits of fuel.
You can see that Teo Fabi has gotten past Rick Mears now, and Rick continues to drop back. Scott Pruitt has him lined up now. So whatever the problems that Rick is having, they are quite serious. I wonder if it's breaking.
It's hard to tell because he hasn't shown anything other than every time he gets past, it's in at the end of one of the straightaways. So it could be that he's got a braking problem, or it could be that the car is just not putting out the power and he can't maintain.
Rick Mears started up at the front, now running back in 8th place and trying to hold off Scott Pruitt. But Emerson Fittipaldi closing down on Michael Andretti. You get an idea of the interval 1st to 2nd, and here is really a 3-way battle for 2nd place.
Yeah, Danny Sullivan has moved up in there, so they're about equal distance apart. And Michael can now, I'm sure, feel a hot breath of Emerson behind him there, because this is going to be a race very, very shortly.
Yeah, but Danny Sullivan, while he tries to chase, who had the fast lap for a while, now once again, Al Unser Jr. is up the ante. His fast lap at 107.94 miles an hour. So little Al is really flying and has managed to pull out a 5-second lead over the 2nd place car of Michael Andretti. Let's go to the pits. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, the man who calls the shot for Al Unser Jr., of course, is owner Rick Gallison. We're interested in strategy. You come from 6th. People are talking about concerns over fuel. Are you using too much fuel getting to the lead?
Not at this point. We feel pretty good. You know, Al's just driving a great race, and we just told him to go drive his race, and we'll be here when he gets back. So he's doing a good job.
You approach this as an all-or-nothing type shot to go for the $250,000?
Only way to go.
All right. Thank you. Rick Gallis, he's got dollar signs in his eyes, Paul.
Well, Gary Gerald, part of the question I think we would have is a lot of the teams indicated that they would be stopping fairly early on. We are now on lap number 18. What's the best intelligence on when to expect stops?
Well, the window is open at this time, Paul, and of course we passed that 10-lap mark. Green flag went up, so anybody could come in for their mandatory stop. But right now, we're hearing that some teams are going to push it as long as they can, because if there's a problem on the course and they have to send a tow vehicle out, it's full course yellow. Then you'd have the advantage of a yellow flag pit stop, and that could make a tremendous difference. So they might gamble. They might push it as far as they can. We've heard anywhere from lap 21 to lap 28, somewhere in that range.
Well, they're rapidly approaching that window right now. And there is some confirmation coming out of the Penske pits that, in fact, Rick Mears' problem is braking. He hasn't been able to get that car slowed down as much as he would like. Out in front is still Al Unser Jr. Second is Michael Andretti. He's in the pits. He comes in for routine service from the Newman Haas crew. Here's Gary Gerald.
Just watching the crew work, and it's fresh rubber on the right side. They check the left side. They have to make two on this mandatory stop. The fuel hose is still engaged. Michael anxious to get away and finally does so, but he almost dragged the crew with him. He really wanted to get out, Paul, but he made it with no problem.
Well, they kept the vent hose up a little longer. I wonder, John, if that was confusion. They weren't going to fill the car all the way. Was the vent man waiting to see some fuel come up, you think?
Well, it certainly appeared that way, but Michael is taking a little time getting up to speed, so I don't know what his problem might be. He didn't get out of the pits with the tires burning like we would normally think, and so now he looks like he's going, but he had a bit of a problem there.
So the leader, Al Unser Jr., Emerson Fittipaldi, moved into second place as Michael headed into the pits. That also pulled Danny Sullivan forward as well. But Al Unser Jr. should be due for a stop any time. The Penske team has already indicated that they are prepared to bring Danny Sullivan in at any moment. Al Unser Jr., though, still fully at speed out on the circuit.
Yes, he's just doing a marvelous job. His car is really operating. Here we have Sullivan in the pits.
So Danny Sullivan from third place rolls in for his stop, and this is a 4-tire change. Rick Mears made his stop just a few moments ago. They changed 4 tires on that car as well. As the Penske team done there, Danny drops the clutch even before he comes off the jack and makes the stop in just a tick under 12 seconds. Nice stop for Danny Sullivan.
I guess once again the Penske guys.
Here's Gary Gerald.
And down off the jack, spinning rubber and burning away is Mario Andretti, and he was about 14 seconds, kicking up a tremendous amount of dust and debris, and we see a black flag displayed for his son Michael, who just crossed the start-finish line. Paul will try to check on that. Obviously, it was a pit infraction on that earlier stop.
So Michael Andretti back and rolling. Bobby, the problem might have been a pit infraction. No official indication of that yet. And here is Al Unser Jr. has already managed to work his way past Rick Mears, who is lagging well back, and has also made his stop. But Al Unser Jr. has not yet stopped into the pits for service.
No, that's an indication that he's not only getting good fuel mileage, but leading this race out front. It's, you know, he's waiting until the very last minute, and hopefully he'll have enough of a lead build up that he can take advantage of that and not lose the ground and come back out in the lead.
You saw the stats panel. Most of Little Al's success, though, at the start of this IndyCar season with his pole and his win at Long Beach, and he confides for the first time in his life he's been a little frustrated. Here comes the Porsche car. Teo Fabi, the crew also from the Patrick Racing team, laying out just behind Fabi for a stop anticipated by Emerson Fittipaldi. Right side tires only for this car. Already they have them changed, and already they're back into the action. Teo, little hesitation as it comes out of the pits, but finally he moves up to speed. And here comes Michael back. Gary Gerald.
Yes, Michael had to lock up the brakes at stop and go. They give him a touch of fuel in just under 5 seconds. It was a pit infraction. Paul, this is not a happy crew down here now. That's a costly one for Michael Andretti, who led the early stages of this race.
Well, the indication, too, is that the reason for that black flag was that crewman that went down that got nudged with the rear tire as they went out of the pits. That was the vent man that went down. Emerson Fittipaldi, the number 20 car. As he comes down the pit road, the Patrick team was laid out plenty early for him. And his pit is right up there just after the turn.
Beautiful stop. He gauged that just right, had a little slippage coming around the tight corner. Into the pits, the guys are on, changing the 2 right side tires, fuel hookup, everybody's out of the way, he's ready, down. That was a nice stop.
Now you may have noticed, look at him come out of the pits. Whoa! Whoa. You may have noticed that the Penske team stepped out for Danny Sullivan. just as Emerson Fittipaldi was pulling in. Now, Sullivan had already made a stop, but he will be answering a black flag that is going to be given to him for spinning the wheels while he was still on the jacks as he came out of the pits. And there is Sullivan making that stop.
There's Sullivan leaving now. I noticed that when his car was still in the air, Paul, and they were ready for him to go, he let the clutch out, and the thing was in gear, and the wheel started spinning, and that's a no-no.
So Danny Sullivan with a quick black flag, a stop and go, back into the action as well. 26 laps are completed by the leader. The leader is Al Unser Jr., and here he comes now on the pit road for the first time. They should have time to get this stop in and out. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
And we watch those familiar blue and white colors come in. He hits the mark perfectly. Owen Snyder and the crew in action. It'll be fresh rubber all the way around, and they'll use all the available fuel. They're right on target. They started in 6th place. They'd open up the lead. Little Al is down and away in under 11 seconds, and it's a jubilant crew down here.
Well, it was a great stop. Not good enough to keep him in the lead. Bobby Rahal was able to force his way past as Little Al rolled into the pits. Little Al had a lead over 20 seconds, but slowing down and speeding up cost him. Despite that, just brilliant pit stop by his crew. But Rahal has yet to stop.
Well, that was magnificent. And of course, now each guy that makes his pit stop is going back out onto the track on cold tires. So it's something you can't just bonsai and go out there. You'll slide right off into the sand.
Looking around, you see the interval to Al Unser Jr. now as he begins to come up to speed. And he's tiptoeing. He's not really coming up fast. He's taking it careful.
Yeah, I would think you have to, because if you see him slip there just a little bit, he did a little fishtail, the tires have got to be brought to temperature or you can slide right out of the hunt.
Of course, on a race like the Marlboro Challenge, any slide off the course will mean the end of your day. Take a look. Bobby Rahal is trying to hold off a charging Danny Sullivan. Sullivan right at the back of Rahal's car. And the power of that Chevrolet engine in Sullivan's car beginning to show on the straightaways. Sullivan comes to the inside. He's got a chance to accelerate here. And Sullivan moves past, picks up 3rd place. Can he hang on to it? He does. So Danny Sullivan threads his way up through the field, getting around Bobby Rahal. Out in front of the field, though, it is still Al Unser Jr. He's having a great day.
It's amazing what the adrenaline will do.
Al Unser Jr., tremendous amount of money on the line, $250,000 to the winner of this race. The number 2 Valvoline machine, Chevrolet powered, is a Lola. He says that in a race here with the top 10 drivers, he really expects a lot of fighting.
You drive hard as you can for the entire race. There's not an area, it's a short enough race where you don't have to worry about your brakes or you know, anything that will deteriorate over a long period of time within the car, because it's a short enough race. And so you go out there and you race as hard as you can for the 100 miles, and it's relatively short. It's a lot like an IROC race.
Well, with the tires fully up to temperature now and the fuel load going a little light, Al Unser Jr. has picked up the pace even more. He's now averaging as one lap at 108.7 miles an hour. Let's go to the pits, Gary.
Well, Paul, we were checking here on the condition of Kevin Peterson, one of the crew members. The vent man was the man who hit the deck on that pit stop. He is okay. He's behind the wall. He's waiting further action. Hopefully, his car won't be back in for any further service. Further word, however, relating to this fuel condition, the word in the Andretti pits for both Michael and Mario is the fact that fuel is very much a concern. They're being advised to conserve, short shift, do everything they can to make sure they can go the 100-mile distance. And remember the heartbreak that Michael Andretti experienced just a few weeks ago at Elkhart Lake. Some are saying this could be as critical as Elkhart or also at Portland, where we saw fuel problems earlier in the year.
Well, Gary, in that battle at Elkhart Lake, part of what decided Danny Sullivan's win there was the fact that the Penske team and then the Porsche team both had telemetry telling the teams what the fuel situation was. What's the story today?
Well, those two teams still have the telemetry. The Penske team doesn't like to talk publicly about the telemetry. The Porsche team, of course, has utilized it throughout the year, and they think that it's to their advantage. We also got a word with Steve Horn a few moments ago. Scott Pruitt, of course, at the back of the pack, but he also trying to conserve fuel. Horn says even for them with the Judd engine, and they figure that they usually get among the best with mileage, but they're going to have a problem. And Horn said, frankly, I don't know if we can make the 100-mile distance. So a lot of guessing going on right now, Paul.
Fuel definitely a concern. Al Unser Jr. climbs the hill. Let's just watch this masterful driver as Rick Mears off the track. Doesn't appear that the car hit anything, but obviously he got off hard with a quick little spin, and smoke coming off the left side of the machine. Johnny?
Yeah, it's very hard to tell where he's waving. The safety worker there is waving that he's okay, that he wants to be pulled out, but obviously the sand pit there saved him from any serious injury to the car or himself, and that's a shame.
Well, Rick Mears staying in the car, which is an indication that he would like to get that car back underway and get back into the action. Al Unser Jr. is still out in front. Back at Laguna Seca in the Marlboro Challenge as the fight continues with Al Unser Jr. out in front. Teo Fabi is chasing Mario Andretti in a battle for 5th place. Fabi closing in. We have just 3 laps to go in the run here. Teo Fabi set up behind the elder Andretti now and going into the last corner. Drops under him, under braking. Can he hold to that position? Mario's forced to the outside, and Teo takes 5th place away from Mario Andretti. A little bit earlier, Rick Mears had a problem, and here was the reason for that situation. We'd indicated earlier that his brakes were a problem on the car. They were going away, and you can see there they are gone. Rick wisely just got completely off of them, let the car come off course.
Yes, he was very fortunate, and of course he got into the sand pit there. They put these sand pits strategically around so that will just what happened happen. It'll give you a chance to slow the car down, get bogged down in the sand.
So of the 10 that started, 2 cars out. Arie Luyendyk when he over-revved the engine, and Rick Mears when he ran out of brakes. You're on board with Al Unser Jr., the leader of the race. But Emerson Fittipaldi lies in 2nd place, just 4 seconds back and closing. Perhaps closing even faster is Danny Sullivan. He's been closing down at a 2.25 a lap. He's the fastest car in the race right now. His fastest lap, Sullivan, turned at 109.3 miles an hour. That's almost a full mile an hour faster than any time yet posted by Al Unser Jr. Shelley Unser, as she prays her husband around this course. You got a view earlier of Teresa Fittipaldi with just 2 laps to go now. Emerson Fittipaldi closing in, and the question of fuel still looms.
Well, it does, and I've been noticing Al Unser Jr. has been short shifting. In other words, he's not running the engine up to full song or all the RPMs. He's short shifting it to save fuel.
And Danny's stop-and-go penalty could have been very costly because Danny is now only 5.7 seconds back. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Paul, we check in with Rick Gallos one more time now as he looks over his shoulder, keeps checking the watch, the interval. How much concerned are you first about fuel? Do you have enough?
No, I think we're okay. You know, we just have to wait and see. And if we're supposed to win it, we're going to win this sucker, so we'll just take a look at it.
It was an aggressive move that put him up in front, and now he has to sweat out the challenge of Fittipaldi and Danny Sullivan. Paul?
Gallos, his team that definitely goes for it. Remember Indianapolis when they decided to go ahead and try and run to the finish.
Don't you just love people that go for it?
I tell you what, these are guys that love to race. 2 racing right now. Fittipaldi in 2nd place. Danny Sullivan just a bit back, and still a chance. The white flag out for Al Unser Jr. 44 laps complete. Emerson Fittipaldi still closing, and the question is still fuel with Danny Sullivan right behind Fittipaldi. Teresa Fittipaldi again holds her husband around the track. Shelley Unser sits on the scoring stand. As some reaction now, Fittipaldi slowed down just a bit, now raises his hand indicating that he is going to slow down completely. So Emerson Fittipaldi comes off the pace, though I don't think Teresa's aware of it yet.
Oh, I think he was probably, the reason she was wringing her hands and praying is he probably was telling them on the radio, I've had a fuel light for a long time, and it appears that I may not make it.
All right, Shelley says he may already have it as Al Unser Jr. working down the last lap now. The final pass down the hill. A right-hander lies just ahead, and Al Unser Jr. can see $250,000 in his pocket. And the crown, the champion of the Marlboro Challenge. The checkered flags lie just ahead, and Al Unser Jr. has won it. A victory for Gallos and Team Valvoline. The checkered flag, twin flags from Nick Finaro, has the Gallos team starts the season with a win and now picks up the victory in the Marlboro Challenge. In the Fittipaldi pit, some disappointment As Emo slows on the course, Danny Sullivan able to get around Emo. Emo tries to shake the car back and forth as he continues to lose positions coming down the hill. Teo Fabi trying to get Bobby Rahal. Boy, take a look at that one.
Man, that was a classic block if I ever saw one. He pulled right in front of him.
Little fight for third place there as Bobby Rahal will finish it in third. Allenser Jr. wins, followed by Sullivan, and look at that. Boy, there's some anger there. Allenser Jr. wins, Danny Sullivan second, Bobby Rahal third, and Teo Fabi fourth in the Marlboro Challenge. It's inland from the Monterey Peninsula for the Marlboro Challenge, which today has been brought to you by the Die Hard Battery. Now with more power when you need it most. By the Robert Bosch Corporation, makers of Bosch Platinum, the ultimate spark plug. By Budweiser, Beechwood aged for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. And by Quaker State Motor Oil. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will. And you think a race like this doesn't put the pressure on? This is after the checkered flag. Rahal and Teo Fabi after that run to the line. Both cars in the pits now. The final standings in this race. Allenser Jr. with $250,000 in his pocket. Danny Sullivan picks up an extra $20,000 for turning the fastest lap in the race. And Emerson Fittipaldi dropped from $150,000 down to $33,000 as a result of apparently running out of fuel on the last lap. There are the 10 best in racing. And Allenser Jr. is at the top of the order. Fittipaldi, his race is over. Well, we're ready now to talk to the winner of this race, Allenser Jr., in the Sears Die Hard Winner Circle interview brought to you by the Die Hard Battery. Now, with more power when you need it most. Here's Gary.
Well, Paul, we've become accustomed to generations of Unsers in victory lane. Here's the littlest one, Little Al, in the hands of Little Al. Congratulations on a well-deserved victory. A tremendous charge from sixth to get the big buck.
Well, thank you. You know, I want to first off thank Marlboro for having a great event, first off, and Valvoline and Ray Kim and Stroh and everybody, and especially my crew and Rick Gallus, because they figured out the mileage right to the T and ended up running out of gas right coming into victory lane, and so it was wonderful. Thanks.
Congratulate you, Al. A terrific victory. It's worth $250,000 of Marlboro money.
An IROC champion, now a champion at the Marlboro Challenge. Allenser Jr., congratulations.